Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Ram Prasad Pujari and this is part 11 of Python programming series. This is the continuation of previous video, that is part 10. In part 10 we discussed about 4 different important functionalities of sklearn. The first one, loading the sklearn data set, and after that we discussed about data pre-processing, where there are two types of pre-processing operations we discussed. One is scaling operation and the second one label encoding. And after that, the fourth operation that we discussed in the last session was splitting the data set into train and test set. Today we'll continue our discussion on sklearn functionalities. We are going to talk about fit function, which is very important function when you're dealing with machine learning. Now for task 5 we need a data set. So I'm going to take advertising data set, which we have seen in the last session, and we need an algorithm or a machine learning algorithm. Algorithm is basically a technique or a procedure to learn from the data, and the type of algorithm or type of technique which is to be used depends on the data distribution. We look at the data, then we decide. In part 8 we discussed about machine learning algorithm in brief, and you can watch that particular video before watching this video. So we'll jump into this exercise. For today's session I need these libraries. I need pandas library, as I am using CSV file here. I need an algorithm. I'm going to use a linear regression algorithm. So regression algorithms are used when the target variable is continuous. This is what we have seen in part 8. And when x and y, that means the features and the target variable, have a linear relationship, then we go for linear regression algorithm. We need NumPy library, which I'm going to import here. And after that, in order to split the data set into train and test, we are going to use a train test split function under model selection module of sklearn. So first task is loading a data set. I have this advertising data set in my local folder. So I'm going to read that using pandas function called as read CSV function. So I'll be displaying the first 5 rows using a head function of this pandas. So data is nothing but my data frame. So these are the first 5 rows, and you can see that this has got 4 columns, and out of which the 3 are independent variables, or we call them as features. So then sales, this is the target variable or output variable, which is continuous here. Now advertising data, what does it do? This is used to understand the relationship between the amount spent for advertising channels like TV, radio, newspaper, and their impact on sales figures. So that will give you a relationship between the amount spent on advertising media and the sales figures. Anyway, we are not going to discuss more about the data set or the algorithm in this case. This is about fit function. Right, so we can get information about the data set. It shows you the number of columns that you have, and there is something called as a null values. We will see that in our next session. So this particular data set is a very small data set with only 200 samples or 200 rows. Now before splitting the data set, we have to make sure we have x and y. X is nothing but the features, which has x is nothing but the features or independent variables. We have 3 features or 3 columns here, and y is nothing but the target variables. So we separated x and y from the given data set. X will have 3 columns and 200 rows or 200 samples. Now I'm going to use linear regression function. A regression because the target variable is continuous, and there is a linear relationship between the amount spent for these advertising channels and the sales figure, and because of which I can use a linear regression algorithm. Now, linear regression algorithm has a learning function of this kind. So this is the function with one independent variable. It looks like y equal to mx plus c, which is a straight line function. Now I have more than one feature. In this case I have three features, so therefore my learning function or linear regression function will look like this. So y equal to c, which is a constant or a bias. So in this case beta naught, which is also called as intercept. And after that I have x1, x2, x3 are the features that I have. They refer to amount spent for TV, radio and newspaper. x1, x2, x3 and y, which are part of the data set and which are already known, and you feed x1, x2, x3 along with y to the machine learning model, and thereby you compute these unknown parameters, which are nothing but beta naught, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3. That means you compute coefficients and you compute intercepts using a fit function. So main task of fit function is to compute unknown parameters, which are nothing but model parameters. So this is very, very important. So we are going to split the given data set using a train test split function. So this is not a new function. We have seen this in our last video. So I'm not going to spend much time on this. Since your target variable is continuous variable, we don't need stratify. Stratify doesn't make any sense in this case. I have used x and y, which are x is the feature with 3 columns, y is nothing but the target variable, and after that the test size is mentioned. So usually 70 is to 30 or 80 is to 20. So that's the ratio we maintain. So here the test size will be 30% of the main data set, or 30% of 200 samples will be part of this test data set. So then a random state, I have explained this in the last session. So this is how a fit function works. So this is the linear regression model that we have. So we give x train and y train. A labeled data set is provided here. Y train is nothing but the label. So this is the labeled data set, and when you fit a model on this particular data set, we obtain these parameters. We get the parameters, which are nothing but coefficients and intercepts. As I told you, sklearn has predefined algorithms. So linear regression is one of such predefined algorithms, and for this task linear regression algorithm is to be used. Once the linear regression model is initialized, we can train the model on the data set using a fit function. So I have used a fit function here, and so this is my data set, which is a labeled data set, x train and y train, which is a training data set. And once the model is trained, so this function will train the model and it computes the parameters. So we can display the parameters using a print function, and there are two types of parameters here. One is coefficient, so there will be 3 coefficients in this case, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, and there is an intercept or a bias. So I can print this using this particular command, and here you can see that there are 3 coefficients. So these are the coefficients. Now each of these coefficients is associated with one of the advertising platforms or media. Now the first one is beta 1, which is associated with TV, and similarly radio and newspaper. And this is the bias or intercept, which is nothing but beta naught in this case. So purpose of fit function is to compute these parameters. Now once these parameters are known, then we can predict y for any given x value. So after the model is trained, the next task is to test this model on a new data set. The data set which is not part of the training data set, so that testing or evaluation will be done to assess the performance of the model and to know that how it performs when it is subjected to a new data set. I hope you understood the role of fit function, and in the next session we'll talk about model evaluation. Thank you so much.